Well, what's up and welcome to the Beyond Sundays podcast. My name is Brett Stewart and I am the host. And today, my co-host with me is the one and only Josh Fenolio.
Yes.
Woohoo!
A privilege
Josh,
to be here.
Come on. Disclaimer to the people. This is like our
Take 12.
Our take 12. I don't know it's 12. It's definitely
It's
like
not.
the fourth.
Yeah.
Recording this intro. The first time I was a dum-dum and I unmuted the wrong channel. So everything that Josh said was not picked up by the microphone. Well,
Yeah.
it was just off in the distance. My microphone.
Yeah.
It was picked up by. And it was full of such wisdom.
That was my best take by
It
far.
was definitely the best one. And so then we recorded another one that I thought was a close second. And we played it back, and there's this awful static noise throughout the entire thing on Josh's channel.
Something is against me. And it's Brett Stewart.
Oh, man. Anyways, but we've made it through. I'm checking the levels right now. We look good.
Sweet.
So, Josh, tell us, who are you, what do you do, and why are you excited about the conversation today?
I am Josh Fenolio. I'm on the groups ministry team here at Beltway. I'm over young adults, and I'm over the groups at North Campus. And so being over young adults, that lends me to wanting to be a part of this conversation about millennials and young adults stepping up in the church and kind of finding their place. I feel like this is their time to step up, and there's a slight disconnect between them thinking that and me saying it is time.
Yeah.
So we're kind of trying to figure out how to help them step up into their anointing.
Yeah. This generation, and I say this generation, it's our generation.
Yeah.
There's a lot on them. There is an anointing on them for, I know we say it a lot in the church world, but for such a time as this, every generation has that. And to go along with what you just said, like, now is our time, like, for such a time as this. And so I'm really excited about the conversation. No matter who you are, how old you are, where you're at, whether you're in the church world, the business world, the community, or whether you're a stay-at-home spouse or parent, the conversation we have today, I think you'll find very insightful and hopefully find things to, if you're not a millennial, invite millennials into the journey, into using, growing, and developing who they are, how they're gifted, and calling them into places of leadership and even telling them, showing them the why behind it. This generation, our generation, is so obsessed with, in a good way, the why behind things. And if you are a millennial, if you're a young adult right now, listen to it and just step out. Step up and step out and watch how the Lord is going to bless you and your peers that you bring into the journey with you. So excited for this conversation. It is a 2-part episode. So the first part is being released today, and then the next episode, part 2, we will release next week. But let's go ahead and jump into today's episode.
Let's go.
All right. Well, today we have Teagie McBeth. Teagie, hello. And who are you? How are you? And what do you do so people could know who Teagie is?
I'm very well. Thank you.
Good.
I'm super excited. Podcasts are my favorite thing.
I
ever.
love podcasts.
I listen to podcasts all day long.
Yeah.
Come at me for podcast recommendations. I got them.
That's awesome. Well, let's just jump to this, and then I'll get you to introduce yourself, because we kind of talked about this beforehand. But why do millennials, our generation, why do we love podcasts so much?
Great question, Brett. We love podcasts because they're genuine conversations. They're real conversations about real topics, and then there's so many that you can just choose. Like, I want to find a podcast on what it's like to raise a 2-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I can go search parenting 2-year-old girl podcasts, and I will get 15, and of all different lengths. It could take me an hour, it could take me 15 minutes.
Sure.
It just,
Yeah. And I tell every guest that I bring on the show, it's not a presentation. I'm never going to hit stop and be like, hey, let's re-record that. It's literally an honest conversation that kind of leads itself. It is not a polished presentation from A to B to C to D with a pretty conclusion bow on top. And that's why I like it, because it depends on the people, their experience, their observations, their insight, and it's just raw, and it doesn't have to be perfected, because one thing about the millennial generation is we love authenticity. We love things being genuine and things not being so polished. So
Definitely.
I'll go ahead and let you finish explaining who you are.
All right. So I'm Teagie McBeth. I am 31 years old, so a millennial. I've been married for 4 years to my wonderful husband, Roy McBeth.
I like to claim a little bit of credit.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, they were at my house for a Christmas party, and we were playing like a Christmas
Trivia.
like Cahoots or
Trivia game. Which I owned.
which Teagie did own, and apparently that's where
My husband fell deeply in love with me and my
Yeah.
knowledge. Yes.
he was like, "Wow, this woman of wisdom."
He was also wearing a Star Wars ugly Christmas sweater, and that does it for me. So
There you go. That's awesome. So I like to take credit for it, and I had the joy of
you married us.
yeah. I always like pause when it's like, yeah, I married y'all, or I had the joy of marrying you. I performed your wedding.
Yes.
So
How do you like being married to us?
yeah, awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so you and Roy have been married 4 years already.
Yeah, in November will be 4 years.
Okay, awesome.
We have 2 daughters. Within that time, we have a 2-year-old, Josephine, and we have a 3-month-old that we just welcomed named Genevieve, and they are
Yes.
awesome. Love being girl parents. I used to be a high school teacher. I did that for 6 years. I taught at Paint Rock High School, that's near San Angelo, and I taught at Winters High School, which is just south of Abilene. And me and my husband decided that I wanted to stay home and take care of our children, and I'm doing that now, and I really enjoy that.
It's awesome.
And Roy, works his tail off for us, and we really appreciate him and love him for that. And we have been members of Beltway Park for, a long time, like 2015. I think Roy's even got me beat on that. So
Oh, he does, yeah, because I came to Beltway
think he did College Park.
on staff in 2015, and Roy was already here and already leading, and he had been here, I think, for a while even. So,
and we just kind of stepped into leading young adult life groups. And that's actually how we met at your house, was
Yeah.
for like the leaders hangout.
yeah.
And when we got married, we just knew we wanted to continue to serve in some way, but we didn't necessarily want to commit, to doing a life group unless that's what God had asked us to do. So we're doing guest services. We do guest services in between the 9 and 10:45 service right now in the North Foyer. And we really love that. And we bring
Yeah.
our girls with us, and we lure people in with baby smiles, and
It's
then they
true.
come and talk to us.
Yeah,
And
sometimes the girls are standing on the guest services desk, and it's like, I'm not new here, but I'll go talk to y'all because
It's
there's a cute little
wonderful.
girl on the desk.
I have literally seen people like looking around lost, and then they see a cute little baby smiling at them, and they're like, oh, like under the pretense of like, oh, a cute little baby. And then they ask us a question.
ask the question.
And we're like, we love that. That's
so great.
awesome. Like, if that helps, then that helps.
Yeah. No,
Because, I think that's everything.
that's
Yeah,
really awesome.
That's me.
Well, cool. That's a little sneak peek of who Teagie is. And disclaimer, I guess in this episode, we are all millennials talking about young adults and millennials. And Josh, I know you're borderline.
Right on the cuff.
Yeah, but you claim it.
I
I
am
mean,
technically a millennial.
you fit right in. For those who don't know, like millennial age range is right now those from like being 25 years old to 40 years old. So 1981 to like 1996, 1997. So anyways, but yeah, so we're going to be talking about young adults and millennials today, specifically in the realms of leadership within the church, leadership within the community. And the idea for this podcast was actually sparked by Teagie in the foyer at guest services with her cute little baby girl on the desk, lured me in. And then Teagie was like, I have a great idea for a podcast, Brett. And I mean, this was like 3 weeks ago. And I was like, that sounds awesome. So Teagie, bring up why you brought this topic to me. Why is it important to you? And just from there, we'll just kind of let the conversation roll.
Okay. Well, first off, to be completely transparent, when y'all posted that the church had a podcast, I was so pumped because, like I said, I love podcasts. And then it's like hosted by Brett Stewart, and I was like, oh, I know him.
I know. I can get on this podcast.
I can do this.
I literally, the day they announced it at church, went home. We went to church, went home for lunch, and I'm making lunch for Roy and the girls. And I was like, oh, one girl, sorry. And I was like, how do I get on this podcast? So being completely transparent, I just wanted to be here. And so I came up with the topic from there. But I do care about this topic because I am a millennial, and most of my friends are millennials. And we're all starting our families right now. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we have little girls, and our friends all have young children. I think in our particular friend group, the oldest one is 8. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But so it's young families, and we use the kids park, which we love. It is awesome. Totally recommend it. We actually volunteer there too on like the rotation.
Yeah. For those who aren't
so
part of Beltway in Abilene, Kids Park is just our children's ministry. So I'll try to clarify any terminology we use that you're like, what the heck is a kids park?
Yes.
That's
we
what
love
it is.
it.
It's our children's ministry.
Josephine loves it. It's great. So, and we do our guest services, and a lot of the people that it was really just looking around that I saw this is a lot of the people that we work with are older.
And
we
serving roles.
Serving roles, yes. Are older, and we are used to that. We grew up in the church, and I was just like, I just don't see other people that are our age that are, I mean, and maybe they're, behind the scenes, or maybe they're leading life groups, and that's awesome. I'm sure they are. But I was just a little concerned that, especially during the COVID stuff too, like everybody backed off on attendance. And it's really easy when you have little kids and jobs. My husband recently got a new job. Like that put us behind the ball a little bit on like, we're tired, starting new routines, new babies, new jobs. It's hard to get back in there and like even just attend church now with things being so different and so weird. And my main thing was we've got to attend. We've got at least attend.
Yeah.
And, things are not always going to be the same. Like eventually these older people, the boomers and the greatest generation that are in these roles of elders, were exactly where they should be. Elders and senior pastors and things like that. Eventually they are going to want to retire.
Yeah.
Or they're going to, maybe God is going to call them to be an elder somewhere else, like move across the nation or across the state. And I love this church so much. I would really hate if we, as millennials, were like standing around with our hands in our pockets going, where did Kids Park go? And where did all the life groups go?
Where did all the surf team go?
Where's the prayer team? Like, is anybody going to pray for me when I go down? Like, that would just be so tragic because we love this church and and it's not just Beltway. I mean, it's the city of Abilene, which is all I can really speak to.
Yeah.
We have a lot of young people that have a lot of gifts, and so we need to use those to serve the church.
Yeah, absolutely. I served here at Beltway as the young adults pastor for like 5.5 years, and Josh is the new young adults pastor. He was much better than I was, and he kicked me out of the spot. And so, now they put me behind a microphone and on a screen. I don't deal with a lot of people in person anymore. That's a joke. But I had a lot of young adults coming up to me of like, it doesn't seem like there's enough groups, life groups, community groups. We really want to be a part of one. And usually my default answer was, well, what if you started one? Like, what if you led it?
Oh no.
Yeah. Like
deer in the headlights.
I know. You come to the altar and you want prayer and there's a long line of people. And it's like, hey, is there not enough people to pray? Hey, have you thought about going through the prayer training and joining the prayer team? Mm-hmm. And so I try to make that my default response. But Josh, as the young adults pastor, what do you see in regards to the millennial generation serving and leading, and maybe the gaps of where we are or where we aren't?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what you guys are already saying, that I don't see them. I posed to some of our leaders the other day, like, where are we on Sundays and on Thursdays when we have church? Like, where's where's our people? Why aren't we on the prayer teams? Why aren't we the greeters? Why aren't we? And so I'm seeing what you guys are already talking about, and I just feel like they're kind of waiting for their turn
Now is your turn.
to step into the church, and I'm like, there is no waiting. You are. It is your time right now. You have got to step up, basically.
It is your time, and like newsflash, you are the church. We are the church. It's not the building. It's not the organization. We, the people, are the church.
Yeah, but it's not a hey, we need to push the others out. It's a we all need to come together and realize that this is our time to make the difference in this world. And so it's not about replacing. It's about everyone needs to be a part of this.
Yeah, joining with. And I will admit it is hard, I think, for most of our generation because, like Teagie said, they're getting in and focusing on, really like refining their career. They're starting their families. But up to this point, we've received a lot. We've benefited from those who have faithfully served and done the work. And, even just the analogy that every generation kind of talks about, I hope that my ceiling is the next generation's floor. We've been provided that, and I consider that a tremendous blessing. I never want to take it for granted, but there's got to be a shift that happens because we're at the age and we're in the places where we should be leading, we should be serving, and we should be the ones in those roles, at least for the next couple decades, while also raising up, Gen Z, which is behind us.
Yeah. I think something that, to speak to what Josh said, is, we're waiting for our turn, is what you said. And one of the things that when I was preparing for this, I was kind of reading through some scriptures, and one of the things that came to my mind was part of this, figuring out what our role looks like and how to get plugged in and how to serve is realizing that the Bible lays out what is needed from its members, like what your responsibility is. So part of it is, as millennials, is thinking like, I wonder what my assignment is. I wonder what my place is. You've already been assigned things. The assignment has already been given. It's in the Bible. That's where you find it. If you didn't know you had an assignment, today you had an assignment. It was given a long time ago. And it is to serve, to use your gifts that God made you. He created you with these gifts in mind. When you were in your mother's womb, you already had gifts. You already had a personality that was needed by the church body. You've already been given that assignment. So now, today is the day to figure out how to use those gifts and how to serve the bride of Christ. That's your assignment. Yeah.
And serve in a way where, like, it might not be the end all be all. Like, it might not be your dream leadership position, but start somewhere. Like, and I got to confess, I talk about this when I teach a lot, but I also struggle with it so much of confusing my position with my purpose. There's kind of this idea of projecting that I will give the fullness of who I am and the gift set that I've been given when I step into the role that I feel like I've been called into. And I just so much like look forward and project to the position and fail to see that my purpose is what my purpose is, and it exists today. What am I doing, and how am I fulfilling it?
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. That was something that my husband and I talked about is, we've been serving in different roles for a while now, when we weren't together and married, and then as a couple. And what does it really hurt to just jump in to a role? Like if you're sitting there in church attending, and first of all, if you're not attending, that's your first step. You need to attend.
Yeah.
Your salvation doesn't come through attendance, but your community does.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting there in the pew and you loved the sermon, but they talk about service roles and they're like, hey, we could really use some help with the Christmas event coming up, or we could use some help with guest services because we've got a lot of people coming through or whatever. and you may be saying, I don't really think that's the role for me. Like, that's not the perfect tailor-made role that I think I should be serving in. But you're not serving at all. So why don't you just jump in with 2 feet and try that? And in that process, God may speak to you and say, hey, I'm not going to ask you to stay here, but I'm going to ask you to move over to this role. Or you might run into somebody who says, man, y'all have a lot of good help here. I wish we had help in blah, blah, blah area.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, wow, that sounds like something I'd be interested in. And you wouldn't have known that because you weren't serving and you hadn't met those people and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing what could happen from just saying yes. Like, I'm even thinking about the Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man. Like, but it's kind of a perfect analogy of all that he was missing out on just because of saying no or waiting or thinking that wasn't for him. And like you said, just say yes to a role and see what happens. Get in the habit of saying yes. I would also challenge that if what you're looking for or what you're being asked to do or where there's an opportunity for you to serve, if it means loving God and loving people, then it's probably yes from God. Like it's pretty clear the heart, the nature, the desire, the character of God and what he has called us to. And so if you're wondering, should I go on a mission trip? I would say yes before you even tell me what the country is. Like there are times where God does specifically tell us like where to go, what people group to go, what role to be in. But often when kingdom opportunities present themselves, we need to get more in the habit of saying yes, and then by saying yes continually, and I don't mean saying yes to everything and burning ourselves out.
No.
I'll speak to that in a second because I think we lean in the opposite direction because we saw our parents burned out. But just getting comfortable and willing to say yes to loving and serving people, and in doing so, I am confident that Holy Spirit will lead you and give you clarity and open up opportunities for you to not only use your gifts, but maybe to identify your gifts or maybe to even grow your gifts. But what I said a minute ago, I do think that part of the millennial generation, I'm one, I can speak to this, is that we try to lean in the opposite directions of maybe unhealthy areas in our parents' generation or things that we would consider neglect. We want to make sure that we don't do that. I know, Teagie, you mentioned that before we were recording. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yes,
just in regards
absolutely.
to what the generations before us put in?
Yes. Just speaking from my experience, and you know what I've seen obviously in society as well, but I don't have statistics to back this up. My parents are wonderful, wonderful people. I mean, I cannot speak highly enough of them and how like that, you know, that's my ceiling is their floor kind of like really, really believed in that and really pushed
Their
for
ceiling is your floor.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
Whatever. You know. Someone's ceiling, someone's floor.
Yeah. That's funny.
They really believed in that. And I mean, they didn't say those words, but I can see the fruits of that. Mm-hmm. They really worked hard. They kept a lot of plates in the air is kind of the analogy that I use is they've got family going, they've got career going, they've got community and church involvement going, and they modeled all of that for us. And that doesn't even touch homework and keeping the house, nice and stewarding their children and stewarding their possessions and things.
Transporting us to all of our games and being our coaches and
taking us on fun
tutors and vacations and
yes, absolutely. So I cannot speak highly enough about that. But I think, yes, as millennials, we saw that and said, there's something missing there, and maybe it's that slow down and enjoy life and have these fun experiences, but not be so burnt out and stretch in a million different directions. I think that scares us a little bit, maybe because we did see burnout or maybe because we did see stress affect their health or their whatever. And this is not specifically my parents, but maybe it is. I don't know. But I think we saw boomers build up a society and a culture around them through their ambition and their hard work. And I think we pulled away from that a little bit and we're like, I need to focus on my health and my fitness and my family and, not be stretched in so many directions. But I think we've leaned too far.
Yeah.
And now we're not stretched at all. We're in our little comfort zones. And I am such what's the word I'm looking for? This is me. This is what I'm struggling with. Like, I'm at home with 2 girls, and my husband leaves and works, and it's just me. And I'm working on how do I parent a 2-year-old, and how do I keep my milk supply up because I'm nursing, and how do I feed us, on a budget, and how do I steward my home the way that I know God is convicting me to do.
Yeah.
But, when somebody comes to me and is like, hey, we need your help. There's a big event and we need your, it's like, well, too much. And that's not too much. That's not. And then, I also struggle personally with my fitness, like my disciplines, and it's not too much.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, getting out of the house and serving the church or building community, I'm a very outgoing person. So for me, that's easy. And I know that's not easy for everybody. I'm very motivated to do those things. But what I neglect are some of those stewardship and discipline and reading my Bible and having a quiet time and those things that are routine and that are disciplines. That's just too much. That's a stretch for me.
Yeah.
And I think as millennials, whatever your focus is, if it's on your work, I'm a real go-getter at work, that's great. But what plate have you let fall? Would be my question is, are you ticking all the boxes? Are you serving in your community? Are you stewarding your family and your home? Are you taking care of your career and using your gifts to bring glory to God, as well as taking care of your marriage as well? I mean, I know it can be overwhelming, but stretching is healthy.
Yeah, we need to be stretched. And you mentioned before that your dad had used the word capacity towards millennials, in the sense of, compared to generations before us, it doesn't seem like we have the capacity to do as much at once. And I'm not saying, again, it's not this say yes to everything, be all things to all people. But there are times where, in the name of self-care, we've leaned too far in the other direction, and it's been more like, well, I don't want to do that, and I think that it wouldn't be good for me. Therefore,
I'm just not in a good place right now.
Therefore, I'll say no.
And and you said here's my trigger word. Self-care is my trigger word. and just I already said this to you before we started recording. I just listened to this week's podcast, or is it last week's?
It's this week's.
This week's, whatever.
For the week that we're recording it.
Yes.
But for those listening, it is episode 11. It was a great episode.
Absolutely. I love it. And I actually went to school with Jessie Jo Young.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I really, really support what she and April are doing. And I love that podcast. I really got a lot out of it. So no hate. And they use the word self-care. And I don't hate that word, but I hate the way that our generation has become enamored of self-care and made that kind of the end all be all. Like, if you look around at our culture, it is a culture of self. It is what are you doing? What can you do better? And in a way, I think that's good. We need to work on ourselves. We need to be better people. But I think we've bought into a couple things that, like hook, line, and sinker, even the Christians, of working on myself, making sure that I'm a good person. I'm using air quotes for the people listening at home. And the scriptures say that no one is good but the Father. No one is good but God. So being a good person is really not a good goal. Being a holy person, being a person after God's own heart, following the commands that are laid out in the Bible, those are good things. But I think our target is off.
I definitely think that we've, in the name of self-care, it's been a good thing that we've talked about self-care and identified it, because that is something that I do think that the generations before us possibly neglected.
Absolutely.
But again, we took something that we saw needed to be focused on, and we made it the tunnel vision lens.
Absolutely. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
And we've neglected to see that it's like what Josh said, like it's our time. It's absolutely our time.
Yeah. I think back to kind of what we were saying about capacities and stuff like that. I think that there's probably a kingdom principle that we're missing. If you think about the tithe or you think about the Sabbath, all these things where you're actually doing more with less is I think a good principle for us to think about also in terms of serving the church and being a part of the community, because I do believe that God's going to allow you to have the capacity to do that as well as the other things in what would actually be less time. But the kingdom principle is just greater than the thought of, I don't have time for that. And I don't think my family could do that. I mean, it's nap time during that time. How could, there's so many reasons, and they're totally legitimate.
Nap is God.
It's
is. Not, but people treat it like it is.
Yeah. Yes. And so it's just coming back around to, are we missing something? And is there a sacrifice that's worth making? And I think we would all say yes, of course.
That's a really good, I've never thought of it in that way, Josh, like the same with the tithe.
Absolutely.
Like how the kingdom can do much with really little.
Less.
Yes.
With less. But when we surrender and give and commit to giving that portion.
Yes. God pays back when you step out in faithfulness, when you step out in his commands. He rewards those things. And it may not look like monetary, but it may, like you said, like multiplying what you give to have a deeper impact. Something that you said, I wrote down Galatians 6:2, which was to bear one another's burdens and so to fulfill the law of Christ. That's maybe you feel burdened and overwhelmed and like, I can't stretch anymore. I've got too much going on. And I need to focus on myself, which you do need to focus on yourself. But have you asked yourself, have I tried to share my burdens with anyone?
Yeah.
If you're walking in community, whether that's inside the church or just talking about friend groups, your life groups, or you're just a group of friends that love on you and do life with you, when you share those burdens, your burdens become lighter.
Yeah.
That's what the church is supposed to be there for.
Yeah.
And
your burdens are lessened when you're in the community, and it's, again, a kingdom principle that we've just got to grab a hold of.
Yeah. And I would encourage people that if you're not connected to a local church and plugged in, what Teagie and Josh just said is absolutely one of the primary reasons why you should. I mean, my role is online campus pastor. I'm all about the creative and innovative ways that we can do ministry and church online, but I don't think an online service replaces the need for such connectivity to people. And it's interesting because I see a lot of, at least where we live, I see a lot of young adults that are connected to community in groups, but for some reason we're not sharing like the fullness of our lives and sharing our burdens. We're almost trying to like balance everything we're doing, the ambitions we have, be in community because we say we value community, but do it on our own. I don't know. It's really weird that even those that are plugged in, I don't think we do a good job of sharing our burdens.
I think that's
with one another.
I think that's very true.
We're not vulnerable like we could be and what the Bible would want us to be.
Yeah.
We're not as vulnerable as we should be.
Yeah. My wife and I were even talking, it was just the other night at dinner about, and like this is a very sad, but I think too often true of a statement of the world does such a better job at loving each other than I think believers do or the church does. Like I worked at a tire shop for 6 years, and even though the choices and the habits and the language and the pursuits of the people that were around me did not line up with what I believe to be righteous and holy and seeking Jesus, I could not argue against the fact that if any one of them had a problem or a need, they told each other, and everyone dropped everything to go share that burden and lighten the load. And so my wife and I were talking about that the other day, actually, of it's kind of just odd that the world in a lot of ways can really love each other as community more than we can. And maybe that's because we've moved to loving ourselves too much
Maybe so.
or in an unhealthy way.
Or, like you said, the vulnerability. I'm not sure what this connects to exactly. I'd have to think about it more. But why would you not be vulnerable? Like, we love communication. We love community. But why do we hold ourselves back in sharing what's really on our heart or really on what's really bothering us or what we've been talking to the Lord about and haven't received answers about yet? I did this with my girls group this last week. Something I'd been feeling bitter and overwhelmed by for weeks. And I'm close with these girls.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is really hard to say. And so here it is. And I won't get into it now, but it was just something that was a burden in my life that I ended up needing to share with them. And it took me weeks. These are my best friends. It took me weeks to bring it up to them. And then when I did, they were so understanding. They were so wonderful. They've reached out since then to check on me for that topic. And I still at home, I'm like at home and I'm like, was that too much? Did I share too much? I should have just kept that to myself.
Oh,
and
no,
that's
I'm
so
a burden
wrong.
to others.
Yes, I'm so difficult to love. And why do we do that to ourselves? Like, why?
In a mindset of self-care, in terms of like trying to help yourself be better, do better, all those things, it seems to be contrary to then expose yourself to, hey, this is something that's going on wrong with me. And so those two are like conflicting right now.
Yeah.
You can't be self-caring and yet be vulnerable.
Yeah, which is interesting because I think a healthy version of self-care
Is very vulnerable.
is vulnerable and bringing other people into it before you've personally figured it all out and dealt with it. And we said at the beginning, millennials love podcasts and other things because of this like raw authenticity, vulnerability that we expect from other people. But then sometimes, like, are we doing it with our own life? And we expect it of others. We need to start living it out ourselves.
Sure. And that's, maybe this is like going off to a real, like a bigger topic, but that reminded, what you said, Josh, reminded me of, that prosperity gospel kind of thinking of like, if I believe hard enough, then, or have enough faith, then only good things will happen to me. And that's insane and doesn't match up with the Bible at all, but we can get into that another time. But that's the same thing. If I was really caring for myself, I wouldn't need to bring anybody else in. And the fact is, we're still young. I mean, there's no rule out there that says when you turn 28, you're totally self-sufficient and you don't need anybody else's help.
Right.
And oh my gosh, I need so much help.
Yeah.
I reach out to my grandmother. I reach out to my parents. I reach out to my in-laws. I reach out to my friends of like, what do y'all think about this? You need to use your resources. And that's something I talk about with my friends all the time of like, have you asked this person? Have you read an article? Have you use your resources? There's no reason you need to have all the answers sitting alone at home.
Thanks again for listening to the Beyond Sundays podcast and this episode with Teagie McBeth and our conversation about just the millennial generation, the young adult generation, stepping up into leadership roles within the church and within the community. Just a reminder, this is part 1 of the episode, and we will release part 2 next week. But thank you for listening and look forward to next week's episode. Be sure to hit that like, follow, or subscribe button, depending on the platform that you're listening to this podcast, so that you can stay up to date with the episodes that we release every Tuesday. We encourage you to follow Beltway Park Church on social media. That handle on all platforms is @Beltway Park. And go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beltway Park Church, so that you can stay up to date with the sermons, the teachings, the testimony videos, and more that we release every week. We hope you have a great week. Be blessed, and remember, God is moving in your life beyond Sundays.